All right. So, as Jacob said, I'm at Sroufe. I am working on a USDA funded grant through the K-State Parks. So, I didn't purposely sign up for the last slot of the day, but it's probably appropriate because mine is definitely a different project. So, it's a little more abstract, a little more conceptual. So, I don't have a lot of the hard data that a lot of the other interns had. We are really okay.
I have you to set your with
Include that onto the presentation.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, it was kind of born from the idea that during 2020, obviously, a lot of things changed because of COVID, and particularly how people spend their time. So, in 2020, during the pandemic, there were a lot of people either rediscovering or even discovering for the first time the great outdoors, state parks, getting out into nature because there wasn't much else to do. And in Kansas, the state park system never closed. So KDWP stayed open throughout the entirety of the pandemic, and in other states, their state park systems did not. So there were a large influx of patrons visiting the state parks in Kansas. And it's kind of to give you an idea of that, 2020 first year that the state parks surpassed 8 million visitors here in Kansas. And for some reference on that, the population of Kansas is just under 3 million people. So it was taxing on the infrastructure in state parks, particularly rural state parks that exactly have a lot of resources nearby, and as in terms of solid waste, have to truck their waste a lot further to get to a landfill. So the solid waste that we're focusing on for this project is food waste, and then some of these other chemicals, PFAS, that could possibly be included in a lot of the solid waste there. So the partner facility that was selected for this project was Wilson Lake State Park. It is definitely rural. So it's just north of Wilson, Kansas, which is they have a population of 683 people, and just south of Lucas, which has a booming population of 395 people. They are also a really busy state park. The number that the staff gave us for the weekly visitation average in May was about 7,426 people per week. So we got to work really closely with the staff there. Lynn Rader, she's the administrative specialist at the park, and then Willis Cole was the park manager, the ranger there on site. So to give you an idea, this is kind of where they're located, right in the middle of the Smoky Hills. It's a beautiful area, which is probably a big part of the reason why they see such high visitor counts. So this is like a zoomed in picture here for you of where Wilson Lake is to Salina is the nearest landfill. So they have to truck their solid waste 60 miles away. So that's a lot in tonnage fees, that's a lot of fuel, that's a lot of CO2 emissions. And part of the reason why we're focusing on food waste is because food waste is 70% water. So it's such a high percentage water content that makes it so much heavier, that contribute to the fuel emissions that it takes to truck that to the landfill. And in addition to that, it creates a lot of methane emissions by just ending up at a landfill and sitting there rotting. So the World Wildlife Fund estimates that all from cradle to grave, all of the resources that go into generating that food waste, creating it, getting it to our kitchens or restaurants or whoever eventually doesn't use it, and then it ending up at a landfill, contributes to about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So it's food waste is a large problem, and that's not even, factoring in the social aspects of that. If you have usable food that is just sitting there being wasted and not being donated or ending up to someone who is in need and could possibly use it. So the other aspect of the solid waste that we were looking at was these PFAS chemicals. So they were created with the creation of Teflon, and they're found in a lot of products that are oil or water resistant. So because of the nature of activities at state parks, camping and boating and those types of things, we knew there was a high potential of finding a lot of product that could possibly contain PFAS being thrown away there at state parks. So the why we're looking at PFAS is because there's a lot that's still not really known about it. They're a group of over 4,700 different chemicals, and they've been linked to a lot of different human health concerns, and where they're disposed of and ending up in the water or the soil can oftentimes pose a threat to wildlife as well, which in turn creates an issue for humans who may possibly ingest those wildlife. In states like Michigan and Maine, they've become an issue there and have led to a lot of do not eat advisories being placed on deer and fish. So it hasn't become much of an issue in Kansas at this point, or at least we haven't collected enough information to call it much of an issue. But there is a lot of potential there for it to become something. And we want to look at, especially an area like a state park that's supposed to be a refuge for wildlife and people, that we want to make sure that we're gaining as information as we can about these chemicals and products that might possibly contain them being disposed of there, because part of what is not really clear for us yet is what the best way is to dispose of them, because they're known as forever chemicals just because of their recalcitrance. Some of them break down either very, very slowly or not at all. So we just want to look into that and gain as much information as we can about those. So the goals for our project were to just get more of an insight about the solid waste stream in state parks and at Wilson Lake in particular. So keeping that food recovery hierarchy in mind, we're kind of looking at recommending different types of minimization and diversion options through the patron and staff education events that we held there at our park and virtually. So these education events, we had two that were targeted towards the patrons that were visiting Wilson Lake State Park, and then one for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks staff. So the other aspect of how we planned on going about meeting our goals was through 3 separate solid waste audits. So we did those kind of in a tiered from the beginning, middle, and end of the height of the camping season when they're very busy there at Wilson. So a little information about those education events. The patron education, we kind of just wanted to keep more of a palatable, this is what the issue is, and outlining why solid waste is an issue, why we want to keep track of what's being thrown away, disposed of, and if there's any better way to minimize or divert that solid waste. So we had those education events for patrons in person there at Wilson Lake State Park on 2 separate weekends. And initially we created this kind of array of different educational information, infographics, and just some facts and interesting information for people to look at. And then we also centered part of that around whether or not the food waste that was being disposed of out there could possibly be composted instead, which, I can go back here to this hierarchy. Composting, it's not very high on the waste hierarchy, though it's something that's kind of low-hanging fruit. So it's easy to teach people about. It's something that people can get interested in. And they're at the park patron level. It's also something that they can do themselves when they come to the park. If they want to take a bucket with them, just like a 5-gallon bucket, and instead of throwing away their watermelon rinds and banana peels and all of that, they can put it in this bucket and take it home to compost. So we built a 3-bin composting demo just for them to see, just pallets, that they could see how easy it was and that was a tangible option. And then our staff education presentation, we were hoping to have it live, but we ended up having it just recording the presentation and sending out the link to the staff there at Wilson Lake afterwards. And that one, we went over a lot of the stuff most of the things that we covered in the patron education of it as well as going a little more in depth into why we're looking at this project, where the grant funding is coming from, and what the point is from their perspective more on the park staff side. So here's a picture of, our little education events there at Wilson Lake State Park. I didn't get a very good picture of our composting demo, so I included just an illustration there, but we had all of the educational information displayed there for people to see, and then I also uploaded it all through PPI's website and created a QR code so that they, could quickly access it on their phone and then be able to reference that after the fact. And the QR code works if you want to scan it. And I also, you will probably be like, doesn't that defeat the purpose of a QR code? But I also have the printed PDFs back here. Which wasn't a waste. I already have them printed. I'm repurposing them. And then the waste audits in particular. So we had to conduct those on Sunday evenings at Wilson Lake State Park, and which was because their pickup day, their trash pickup days were Mondays. So we wanted to get there in the evenings on Sundays so that we could take a look at that when hopefully it wasn't quite as hot, but spoiler alert, it was still really hot. And so we got to really just kind of look at, so we came up with this kind of different process for solid waste audits than what is typically done. And, it's still new. So we're kind of looking at how the process of that is and what the potential is with the information that we got from. So we had this kind of contraption set up where we would send the bagged waste, open a bag at the top of that chute, and then film it in slow-mo as it was going down so that we can analyze it after the fact. And then this I just had to include because it was an interesting event there at the beginning. Jacob was there too. We were kind of looking around at some of the different dumpsters there at the park, and this was right after they had pickup, so it was fairly, just within the last day, we were at one of those dumpsters and there were 2 really large turkey carcasses that someone had just thrown in a dumpster there in the park, which was kind of sad, kind of unfortunate. So we took some pictures and told Willis, the park ranger manager out there, to see if he could find out some other information about that, or just if it was, I'm sure, usable knowledge for him. So this hopefully will work. This one I actually sped up a little bit because I'll go back and show you. Back here on this tripod is a GoPro, and then on the bar over that chute up there was a Google Pixel that was filming in slow-mo. But that GoPro is kind of just getting a different vantage point of the entire process, so you can see. And I'll see if it'll play for me here. Yeah. So I sped this up a little bit, but so you can see what the process actually looked like. It was Arthur, the PPI employee who submitted this grant to the USDA. I don't know if it's going to load for me here very well, maybe. And we had a little kiddie pool down here catching anything that might have been kind of a mess there on the sides. And then we had a shovel. We had to scoop all that up at the end and put it back in our little trash can there that would catch everything. As you can see, there was just a lot of plastic, a lot of, the PFAS element that we're looking at is not only in things like camping equipment, like tents and chairs and all of that, but it's also in a lot of food wrappers, like, the little plastic wrappers that hot dogs come in, and lots of things like that are obviously being thrown away there in that environment. And then, of course, we were looking for food waste in particular to see how much of that we saw, which I have another video too. I don't know if this one's kind of slow to load. I tried to speed it up so that it would play faster, but might not have made a difference. So this is more of what the footage looked like once we got it back from the Google Pixel and looked at it in slow-mo and cropped it down to just a smaller view so that we could just look at the waste screen. I don't know if it's going to play for me. Okay, I don't know if I can get that one to play. All right, maybe I can come back to it. But in this video in particular, I'll kind of describe to you, since I think it's going to load. You can see in this one some watermelon rinds, an aluminum can. Those are kind of some of the more common things that we saw. We saw a lot of aluminum, a lot of cans, a lot of pop cans, a lot of beer cans. And they don't currently at Wilson Lake have any kind of recycling program. It all just goes to the same place and is all trucked to a landfill there in Salina. So what we found in the end was that really a lot of it was more of the plate waste or inedible types of food waste. So inedible meaning, banana peels, watermelon rinds. Plate waste being things that were already prepared, like hot dogs that had been cooked and were disposed of after the fact, something that would be hard to donate. It wasn't really waste that we felt like could be repurposed or maybe donated anywhere in Wilson or Lucas or any of the surrounding areas. But just something that I noticed throughout the process was that there was so much aluminum, and state parks in Kansas specifically are entirely fee funded. So they get no state tax revenue and often have to operate on a very minimal budget. They do. I obviously am familiar particularly with Wilson because we worked out there, but they do a great job at their infrastructure. They kept things moving really great for having such a small staff and a small budget. But we looked at the potential of maybe taking some of that aluminum and selling it back through a recycling program to have some sort of revenue coming in. I looked at, because the numbers that they gave us are really only, the visitor count is really only accurate, I feel, for their busier type of season, which is about, mid-April to early October. So I looked at from about a 24-week period, if they were getting an average of 4 cans per visitor, and assuming 24 cans in a pound, that they could sell that back at 5 cents a pound and make about over $2,000 throughout that busy season, and also produce just over 22 tons in their solid waste relating to their tonnage fees and fuel costs. So I think that there's a lot of potential there for possibly looking into a recycling program through them, which of course, though, this isn't including the manpower and, the labor costs that they'll have to put into implementing that. So I think that that's, a possible potential recommendation for them. And for future projects, that's really, a big majority of this. A lot of it was gaining a lot of data, a lot of insight into their solid waste stream. So for future projects, I felt that the patron education events could have really probably been more impactful. We looked at the way it was established was that we were going to be there in person talking to people, which is great because of a captive audience. You have a lot of people there who obviously care about camping and hopefully the environment. But I felt that we could probably reach more people and in a better kind of environment if we looked into making those patron education events virtual. So there's virtual presentations for the staff, which, maybe a shorter virtual presentation that could be linked to something like the Campit app, where through Kansas, when people want to book a campsite, they have to go through the Campit app and they'll receive a confirmation email afterwards. So if there was something in the actual app when they went in to book their campsite, or even in the confirmation email afterwards, that could be just kind of like a short, noteworthy attention grabber that they could see and then scan to that link of educational information and possibly a recorded presentation. I think that people would be more prone to give you the time and attention before their trip when they're planning and excited and maybe sitting at their desk at 2:30 on a Friday just waiting to get out of there. Maybe they'd be likely to look at that information rather than while they're spending time with their friends and family at the park on their vacation. So I also think that, so we looked at what the potential was for those waste audit videos to use AI object recognition so that we could kind of scan through and use that as a quick way to try to get counts on how many cans you see or what kind of food waste there is. We were discussing with the innovation lab at K-State how we could go about that, and we just haven't really had time to implement that into these few weeks of the project. But I think that there is a lot of potential there with the video data that we have. And then we also, we focused on Wilson Lake State Park, but this message could really be useful to a lot of rural state parks around Kansas who might be dealing with some of the same issues. And then from my personal experience, it was a great experience for me. My background is really I've worked in bank marketing for 5 years. So this was definitely different for me. And it was great for me to be able to apply my background in a way that I didn't really anticipate. I got to do a lot of content creation for the patron education events and, outreach through the state park staff and through the patron education. So when I applied for this, I didn't necessarily anticipate that anything would go in that direction, but it did. And so it was great for me to be able to apply some of that here. And then because I worked directly with Arthur, who submitted the grant, I think I got some insight there into kind of how the grant process works and working on funded projects and field work, which I had no experience in before. So it was a really great experience for me. And in Kansas, you can't really beat those views. So it was fun to be at Wilson Lake. So does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Mike.
I have two actually. Can you compost a whole turkey?
I would assume yes, because you can compost a full pig. I mean, I don't see why not. Yeah.
Second one is, what's the PPI get for a sliding trash on the slide?
Well, it's I'll show you just because I might as well show this picture twice because it's a pretty cute picture of me. I pretty much these big gloves up to your elbows. So I had two different sets of gloves, one that went up to my elbows and one that did not. And I should have worn those both times because on one day I had a mishap with some broken glass and it's right in my little forearm there. So I probably should have PPE is a good question because honestly, I feel like you could never have too much PPE for that job. I mean, I could have worn a full hazmat suit and still felt gross and icky afterwards. But yeah.
How was the second go around on the public outreach?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So the first one, we really didn't see a lot of traffic. We were set up at the Tatanka Lodge there in Wilson Lake State Park, and that was where the park staff had recommended probably had the best setup for us to, had electrical plugins and all of that, which it was a great setup, but it didn't see a lot of foot traffic. So the second time we asked them if it was all right, and then we moved it to that where I have the picture. Oh, I think it's back. That was just a grassy area. This is a little playground over here, and it was over in the Oto area. So that's a lot more tent camping heavy. So you see a lot of people just walking around to and from the bathhouse and taking their kids to the playground. So we got a lot more people to stop there because they were just walking around. But, I don't think that there was anyone really stopping for the purpose of talking to us or coming there. It was just by happenstance, people walking by, waiting on their kids at the playground, or a guy waiting on his wife to take a shower at the bathhouse. So, but yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah.
How effective would you say the filming the trash coming out slide is in terms of dividing out, what trash would look?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wish that this video would load because it actually.
I can work on it while you talk.
Well, we uploaded it onto YouTube for that one presentation. So I know there's a link to it, but I don't know where it is.
It's not on our YouTube site.
It is, yeah, it is.
Oh, I can get it. Go ahead, you talk.
I actually felt like it really was pretty effective. Because of the the way it was going through, I mean, I felt like a lot of the things that you were kind of like, what was that? You probably would have had a hard time figuring out exactly what it was, even if you were sorting through everything. And I will say too, that I think one of the big benefits to it was that we, there's a few benefits. One of the benefits is that we have one of the benefits was that we have the data now that we can go through and always have to access back. There's, I guess, less human error in it. But also, I think that we were just able to have so much more data than we would have before. I don't think that we could have, with just the two of us, there's no way we could have gotten through the sheer amount of data that we did. Being able to just slide it down that chute really quickly and bag it back up and put it away as we would have if we had tried to go through each thing and have categories that we were separating it out and weighing it and all of that. So in this setting, I think it was beneficial just to be able to go through that quantity of it. So it's actually just the video.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I don't.
Let's see. Let's go. Just hit back.
I got to thinking though. I wonder if it might not be public.
Might be on the other web page, which is not public yet, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're? Yeah.
But
Okay.
I have things on my email, but
Okay.
I can send it to you.
Well, I don't know that I
Okay.
will toggle that, but
And I'm sorry.
Were you counting like individual pieces? What you use the video for?
So
We went back and looked at it.
yeah.
we've really just kind of analyzed a lot of that we're still kind of looking at exactly the parameters that we want to look at it in, because like I said, we got through such a huge number of all of this that we have just like hours. There we go. Yeah.
Just had to be in
Yeah.
this mode.
Yeah. It's a very short, like 10-second clip. But I mean, it was surprisingly pretty accurate that what you could see in it.
How much waste did you do?
So we went through 9 different dumpsters that were that size in that picture. So we went through 9 of those on all 3 of the different occasions. So, you know,
Sunday nights, they're probably pretty cool.
yes, yeah, depending on, you know, the one that we did in the earlier season, maybe we saw a little bit less of the bagged waste than obviously we did in like mid-June, or just, I guess the last one was just this past weekend. So yeah. Yeah, but so varying. I mean, the first one, you know, I would say, gosh, it also really depends on, I should have included, I had too, a map of the different dumpsters where they're located. We tried to just get a pretty good sampling of different areas of the park because it is a huge park. So, you know, depending on the area too, if it's not as busy of an area, they didn't have quite as much as, say, like the Oto area. There was a dumpster pretty close to where we did that patron education event, and that one was always chock full. So there was, yeah.
Did you ever do any audits again for holiday?
We didn't do any of the holiday weekends, no, which part of the reason too, we kind of knew we might not have gotten as much those times because, which sounds weird, but they told us that a lot of the time, Ellen and Willis said that most of the time they'll have it picked up twice on those weeks just because it would have been way too much to deal with. So they would oftentimes come pick up like Saturday, I think she said Saturday and Monday. So we knew we wouldn't have gotten as accurate of a picture. So.
I had just a couple of quick questions
Yeah.
for you. Well, actually, this is a statement, maybe to clarify. I can't remember if I learned this from you or from Arthur.
Yeah.
It seemed like it just recently came up. And this makes sense, right? But I was curious about tent campers versus RV,
Mm-hmm.
because certainly RV campers take their food home with them because they've got refrigeration.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so did you guys look at that and like what percent were tent versus?
Yeah, we kind of did. So one of the areas there was only really one dumpster that we looked at that was more, and there was one that was just around some cabins that you can rent there too. So that was kind of interesting, but they were probably more like the tent campers, except for that it was interesting. You saw a lot more like cleaning materials because, you know, obviously people would go there and want to clean out the cabin after they had stayed there and kind of clean up after themselves. So that was one aspect from the cabin dumpsters that we saw more so than either the tent camping or the RVers really. So, but yeah, the RVers, I would say, and it was interesting too, the different types of food, like, you know, for people who came to RVs or cabins, it was not uncommon to see like a whole half a sheet cake or something thrown away because, you know, a lot of tent campers aren't going to bring that kind of food. But if you're staying in an RV or a cabin, you will. So, yeah, there was definitely a lot of variations. And, you know, I felt like from what we saw, even in the RV and cabin areas, or the RV in particular, there was still a lot of that, you know, plate waste that people wouldn't necessarily put in Tupperware and take back home. So, but yeah, they did. And the idea I got was that either the tent campers, they cooked everything they brought with them and just threw away what was left over, or they actually did pack out, you know, things like raw meat or things that weren't cooked that they still had left over, because we really didn't see a lot of the kind of food waste that could be qualified more as pure food waste that couldn't be donated.
So lost food.
Lost food, yeah.
Yes.
Mhm, yeah.
Yeah, because on average, it's like 40% of what we put on our plates ends up in the trash.
Yeah.
As consumers at home. And so when you think about it, too, from campers, it sounds like ultimately less than that. That's what you thought. You thought
Sure,
for
yeah.
rinds and, things like that.
Yeah.
Which is really good.
It is, yeah.
It's really good,
It is.
from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, Abby is going to be working with us on some other food waste projects because we actually have 2 other projects that we could really use help with that are food waste oriented, and then we have one other potential one coming up actually with WSU that we probably have not talked about at all, but but we told her no project will be nearly as messy as this one. It's not normally the kind of thing that we do. This was Arthur came up with this very, very interesting project and then use of technology to with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have another question, Jake?
Yeah, so trash. So many different objects go into the trash.
Yeah.
And so if our corporate department mentioned one down, this one is
Yeah.
What are some of the wonkiest things you've done? So there's some strange stuff with the primarily your watermelon and your beer cans.
Oh no, there were definitely strange things too. Yeah, luckily we didn't find anything like a gun or weapons, but I found a cell phone that was turned on, like someone obviously must have accidentally thrown that away, I would imagine, or they were getting rid of evidence or something. I don't know. But and then we also thought like one thing that I didn't really expect that was just really strange was bags and bags and bags of clothes. Just clothes that people were throwing away that I guess they didn't want to take to Goodwill, or it's very strange that you would take that to a park and throw it away there, but I don't know. Something else that he mentioned was that, because it's a rural area with a lot of kind of low income areas around it, that it could very well be people who live nearby who are just kind of dumping things because it's a free place to dump things, basically. So, but that was definitely strange too. So, and I can't even, I would have to think there were some weird, things, but yeah.
I assume the turkeys did not take it right now.
They didn't. We didn't pick up the turkeys and shoot them down the slide, but I mean, we were joking about that one. He kind of looked like he was having a good time anyway. Here, Marvin. So. Huh?
It's a foul situation.
We've been working on that.
Thinking about that one for a couple months now.
Any other questions for Abby?
Thank you.